So what I'd like to do is introduce William Waters to all of you who already know William, I would imagine. But, we just talked about you guys. You were talked about.
And it was all good.
It was good. Those are wonderful. I don't think the city right now would run without William. I think he's one of our key players in this town. And I know,
He's gonna ask for a raise.
well, he probably deserves it. He probably even deserves it, but we know how cash poor this town is, so we will speak up for him if it comes up, but, we'll see. So William, thank you for coming.
Well, good morning. I'm William Waters. I'm the Community Sustainability Director for the City of Lake Worth. For those of you who don't know, that is a combination of what was previously 3 different departments. It includes building division, buildings licenses, code compliance, use and occupancy, planning and zoning, historic preservation, sustainability. We also provide the GIS, Geographic Information Services function, and design consultations from my background as an architect, urban designer, and interior designer. We cover all those over at 1900 2nd Avenue. In collaboration with our Economic Development Initiative, which began with the hiring of Dolores Key in March of 2012, she's now with the City Manager's Office. We have finally rolled out our first initiative when it comes to sort of marketing and branding, the art of Florida living. The two sort of things that are not happening standing up on their own are 2 of our focus pieces, which will eventually become posters or billboards. We've already had one forum that was last week, attended by about 70 people from the development community that deal with entitlements, land purchases, design of projects, communities, and they were there to learn about the new land development regulations that went into effect last August, and the comprehensive plan which went into effect almost 2 years ago, August 2012. So the city has adopted a tagline, the art of Florida living, and then we are sort of running with that in terms of what all is art in Lake Worth, and focusing on the cultural arts and the fact that Lake Worth is probably the art center of Palm Beach County. It's also centrally located and has one of the best demographics in terms of potential for increased values. We couldn't get much lower than we already are in many terms, and so our focus is to attract outside businesses, outside investment, people to come and join and be part of the Lake Worth experience. To that end, we developed this little flashcard system. So far, my department, Economic Development, and CRA are only ones that are included in this so far, but eventually an entire set of rack cards in a sort of palette format based on the arts, each one has its own color, and has a little name, for every departmental function in the city. So there are cards here for the planning, zoning, historic preservation, building, code compliance, business licenses. The information here reflects what is on the city's website, which is now getting closer to being more interactive than it was previously. All of our applications are online. You can fill them out there. You can send in questions. You can find out the status of building permits if you have one and you know the building permit number. You can also find out the status of code compliance issues and business licenses. So we felt that this was a handy little directory to have, and we'll add to it as time goes on and other departments create their little cards. And so that was the first part of it. And then we've also done some studies of properties that we feel are good examples of what could happen in Lake Worth if someone were to come in and redevelop them. And they are not exactly, they're not supposing what the city wants to happen, it's what is it could happen. Because we're trying to stimulate people's creativity and imaginations on what can Lake Worth be as a place of historic neighborhoods, integrity, active businesses, a diverse population, a community that embraces the cultural arts and our history. And people that we want to invite to come here need to embrace that, respect that, and also work within our land development regulations to ensure what they create here or build here is sympathetic, harmonious, and is what the community expects to see happen in the city. The lady who, I don't remember who invited me, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry.
It's Patty Sheldon.
And I know that you probably have questions. Just to give you a little overview, because you were mentioning raises, but no one person is successful without a really good team. And it's taken about 3 years to put together an extraordinary array of people in the department I oversee. It was tragically inept, I will agree, 3.5 years ago. And it's been a lot of hard work among a lot of people to find the right staff, create the right positions so that the questions that you have and the desires that you have to invest in the city can be taken on in a very customer service friendly manner that is fast, predictable, and ensures that when you go through it, you have as few headaches as possible. Parts of that were in rewriting parts of the comprehensive plan, which oversees the vision of how the city will develop. It includes what types of activities can happen in certain areas of the city. It involves heights and floor area ratios, which is the relationship of how large a building is to the spot that it's on. And when that was adopted, we followed up with adopting a whole new set of land development regulations, which used to be called the zoning code. And that stipulates what can happen where, how intense it can be, how high it can be in the process. We've done some extensive studies and determined that in Lake Worth, to do almost any project except a very small industrial project, we are the least expensive place to invest from the time you apply for development approval through the issuance of a permit. And it's significant, the difference. We have a little chart that we're going to put in on the website very soon that shows you the difference in the cost between our city and all the other cities in Palm Beach County, and we are by far the least expensive. The city manager has put a focus on trying to break down disincentives, and that was a huge one. What is the cost to come into the city, and also the land development regulations. The city's also made a focus on reducing electric rates, and that's being done in four different ways. One was the negotiation of a new municipal provider for electricity, which reduced our rate structure. Our expanding businesses and inviting investment increases demand on the electrical utility, which then brings in more revenue, which then we can reduce the rates even more. The commission has adopted an ordinance to be a rate parity, I think, in the next 4 years. The rates have been reduced the last 3 years, and I think it's right about 13 or 14% comprehensive rates have been reduced. And then lastly, FP&L keeps raising their rates, so eventually we're all going to be at the same place, probably sooner than 4 years. So that's working toward getting rid of that disincentive. We've also been working with the Business Development Board in a very collaborative focus, adopting some ordinances that facilitate investment in the city. They are going to be doing an article about Lake Worth and investing here in their quarterly newsletter and their magazine. The final piece of it was adoption of what we call a development concierge service. And it's a unique vehicle in at least South Florida, if not the whole southern United States, in that we will bring together all the development review entities that are involved in the city to the table to meet with an investor prior to their buying property or while they're doing their due diligence to sort of go over with them what hurdles they might face, what information we have about that project, and what the process will be depending on what they want to do. It's been very successful with 4 projects so far. People have been very happy that we've been able to pull that array of talent together, and we can usually do that meeting within a week. After you submit an application, how the regulations are set up, you can be approved by one board at one hearing in 90 days. That is the fastest process in Florida. If you have to make a change to the zoning code or do what's called a comp plan amendment through a residential or mixed-use plan development, it does go to the city commission with 2 hearings because it's an ordinance, but that can be done in 145 days. The shortest process I have found is between 180 and 210 days. So even our longest process is shorter than most processes in other parts of the county. The development community last Thursday found that extraordinary. The one conflicting part about it is that people who do a lot of sophisticated development don't quite understand why our process is so simple. And trying to explain that simple is simple is sometimes a little bit unusual. I didn't think I was going to face that fact, but it has happened, and we're getting through that because we are trying to be as development friendly as possible, and we feel that the regulations we have in place will ensure that what happens here will be accepted by the community and embraced, and it will enrich the environment, the built environment, the history of the city, and complement it and build tax revenues and tax base, which back to the raises. The city has not had any raises in 8 years. So I am flabbergasted and honored that my staff is sticking by me, knowing that in the next fiscal year there's likely not to be another raise. So though I appreciate your support for my getting a raise, I think I'm paid sufficient for the time being, and I'd rather you support a raise for the staff, because we have a good set of people, and it will be more and more difficult to keep them on board as the economy heats up and there are more attractive offers in other municipalities or in the private development community. So that's an overview of what I do. Plus, I probably left out a lot of stuff because as an architect, I do get involved in a lot of design work for the city and consultations, and then I also have a historic preservation background. And so all of that sort of comes together and provides a basis for our trying to get people to invest in the city. We do have about $100 million of investment either coming out of the ground or in the development review process. And so that is an uptick from zero. When it comes to commercial, there was no commercial activity in the city in 2009, 10, 11, 12, and part of 13. It was so bad that the property appraiser's office was calling myself and the mayor wanting to know what was going on because our tax base was not growing. Many cities, even though they saw a decline in property values, their overall property value for the whole city did not change as much because there was still investment happening. Where in Lake Worth we didn't have anything. So right now we have 3 apartment complexes being done. We have a new headquarters for a sprinkler distribution center coming for review, motel, and a housing development behind hopefully Waymakers Ford. It's come in once. They decided to change their layout and it's going to be coming forward again. So you'll be seeing probably in advertisements on the Planning and Zoning Board's agenda a number of projects that are coming forward very soon. There have been also a number of houses going before the Historic Preservation Board. The activity downtown has also picked up. Like you mentioned, that building has sold. It is in a historic district. It is considered a historic structure, though. It's been changed a lot when the city didn't do so well with its historic preservation efforts, and we do hope that whoever comes in and wants to renovate that building will bring it back to some part of its past glory. So I'm here to answer your questions that you might have, or if you have things you want me to look into, I can do that as well. I may not have a ready-made answer, and so I brought my business cards for any of you who want one. The contact information for myself is also on this little handout. Go ahead.
I'll start. At our last meeting, we wanted to come up with some questions that we could ask you, and part of it, I think I had a conversation with Michael a while back. First of all, I want to compliment you, your staff, what Michael is doing, because, you know, even as we all sit here and feel the downturn in this economy, and many of us are suffering, we sit here week after week after week wondering if we're ever going to have business again. You know, but we know that behind the scenes, you were doing a lot of things to restructure this whole city and make it work, and it's not always apparent, you know, to us as we sit here. So I really do want to, I'm so impressed with you, I'm so impressed with Michael and what you all do. Some of the questions we came up with were fairness. In enforcing codes and enforcing what the state says has to be done in this town, and questions, you know, and I addressed this with Michael, and he said, well, there are sunshine laws in place. If somebody in this town is fined and somebody else is doing the same thing and not being fined, we can find out. And we don't know how to find out, or I don't know how to find out where all of the fines have been levied against people within this town to see if everyone is being addressed fairly. Because if somebody's doing something wrong, of course they should be fined, but so should everybody else be fined if they're doing the same thing, or not fined if one person isn't. So that's one question.
Should I answer that one first?
Yes.
Okay. Code compliance has sort of a tumultuous history. We've gone through an entire restructuring. There's only one person left in code compliance who was there when I got there. And we've created 4 new positions that deal with a whole array of issues. There is a dedicated code compliance officer for each area of the city, and we have a floater, and we have someone working on the weekend. We have done, at this point, after next week, we will have initiated or completed, I think it's 49 changes to the code to make it fair, make it transparent, and make it so that people can understand the process. The biggest change was the chronic nuisance ordinance, which allows us, if you are unwilling and do not want to take care of your property, and it generates lots of calls of service to PBSO, or is a property that's not being maintained, or needs to be boarded and secured, or demolished, the city, at the end of a hearing process, can go and do that on your behalf, charge you. If you don't pay, it goes to the tax card. The city has spent literally, I would say, millions of dollars complying people's property and never collecting. It is tragic to see in the past how your money has been squandered, and it really is upsetting. So I made a goal and a commitment not to waste your money. If things had to be delayed to do it right, we could ensure some recoupment of the cost. That was better than just spending money unwisely and it going out the window and we're never seeing it back. When it comes to being fair, the city has in the past, and it still does, follows up on code complaints, whether they're anonymous or not. We get a lot of complaints every day. Unfortunately, in responding to the complaints that are generated by citizens and businesses, we're not always able to look at everyone who is committing that same infraction at the same time, because they may have 7 different calls in their region to deal with that day from just generated from the public, and to do it comprehensively and fairly, they really need to be targeted and proactive. We've tried to pull back, and at least pull back one person in downtown. I'll give you an example of what she did. We had her go through from 10th Avenue North to 6th Avenue South along Dixie, and then Lake and Lucerne from Dixie to A, identifying every single code compliance problem that was there. And it was in the hundreds of violations from all over the place. Building maintenance, trash, dumpsters, illegal signage, illegal operations, lack of business license, lack of use and occupancy. But so we decided initially to just cite the people for their lack of business license and try to bring them into the process and say there are other businesses that are flying right and paying their taxes and paying use and occupancy. Why are not you? Just in that small area, there were 128 businesses that did not have a business license. That actually equates to tens of thousands of dollars the city's not collecting every year, which makes your taxes higher. So I hope that you'll support. We initiated that process to send violations to those businesses to get them in the process and apply for and hopefully obtain their business licenses. We are also doing a bit of an amnesty period because the code compliance was rather erratic and the code has changed. We've initiated, I guess we have about 18 months left. It's sort of an informal amnesty period that if you've been operating here for a long time and you haven't had your licenses, we'll give you the opportunity to pay up your back things, even if you maybe weren't operating the way you were supposed to, and then bring you as close to what the code allows as possible. And that, as an example, because they're not here, the CVS Pharmacy didn't have a business license for 4 years.
Oh my God.
And a pharmacy of that nature, the drive-through, is considered a conditional land use. Technically, under our ordinance, we could have put them out of business. You do not have a license, and without a license, you're not documented as being operating, so you can't be there. You have to apply for the process again. Well, we work with them to pay their back taxes, catch up. It was surprising that a national chain doesn't know that they have a business license everywhere else in the country, except for Lake Worth. It's remarkable. Part of that problem, and I do need cooperation from business owners, is to help keep our database up to date. A lot of businesses change their name, change their mailing address, change their ownership, and we don't know about it. And I don't have the staff to go and research how many times the business changes its name. So when we send renewal letters out, it's amazing how many of them come back as being uncollected or undeliverable. But I know the business is still there, and then trying to track down who is now the owner. So you're communicating with us and helping us keep up to date with who is what and who is the owner of a business will be very helpful. I think to answer your question the best I can. We have made a focus on life safety issues, especially west of Dixie Highway when it comes to building conditions and life safety. So we are, from that standpoint, probably going to be going to do up to about 7 demolitions before the end of May. And we have maybe 25 or 30 that are in the hopper at some stage of notification to move forward with demolition and try to deal with the blight that's over there that the CRA can't deal with because the institute money is limited or their process isn't able to take on a code compliance problem.
Okay, could you ask questions? I have a lot of them, but.
Okay. You mentioned the Business Development Board. Is that the city of Lake, or is it Palm Beach County?
That's the Palm Beach County Business Development Board, headed up by Kelly Smallridge. They're on Vernon Street, downtown West Palm Beach. They advocate recruitment of businesses for the various target clusters of the county, which include aviation, research development, tourism, medical something, R&D, sustainability, environmental. There's about 7 different industry clusters they've been focused on. We adopted some of those, and if you are a business related to those clusters, you get expedited building permit review and development review, no extra charge. It's in our Kelly Smallridge. Gary Hines is actually the person who grew up in Lake Worth, who works for them, who actually is our sort of contact person. And it's H-I-M-E-S.
So, for example, a woman who wants to bring something very big in the corner of Jay and Lake, this would be a place to go to.
It depends. They don't do very much when it comes to retail because their focus is on sustainable jobs of a certain salary range or average that is at or above the median salary for the county, which is about $50-some thousand. As a comparison, the median salary in Lake Worth is 24. So we are less than half of the salary of the average in the county, which causes the problem when we're trying to attract businesses, because if you do a democratic economic study of the city doesn't qualify for many businesses to actually locate here because the amount of disposable income to support that business is not actually in the city. So we are aggressively trying to attract people to move to the city who have a high level of income, as well as tourism, which those people do bring dollars, and they usually spend anywhere from $150 to $300 per day. And if we can get them to stay in Lake Worth for 2 days, that's $600. And it has a multiplier effect.
How do we include the snowbirds in the city? Demographics, we do that now. Or do we?
It is done partially. Some of it is based on census data, and some of it is based on, I can never remember the acronym, but Dolores Keenan. It's what income or assets are available to that community. Unfortunately, a lot of our snowbirds actually fall well below the average median income for the county as well, significantly below. They may have assets, but their actual gross income, tax purposes, which is reported, is very, very low in comparison to the rest of the county.
A lot of people come to town, and when I first came to town, one of the most charming things about the town were all of the outdoor cafes in front of all of the restaurants. And I know we're in a constant battle with the state of Florida as to the ownership of the first 6 feet of, off of the curb. We also know that some people's properties extend there when they in owning the buildings. We're not sure whose does and whose doesn't. I'm not sure, but. So there are a couple of questions there. Is there a way of negotiating with the state so that the restaurants in this town can stay alive with these lovely things that they have there, and that people like to come to town, sit down, eat outside? And is the ADA compliance separate from the first 6 feet, or is it included within the first 6 feet? That's the 4 feet.
The ADA compliance is anywhere on the sidewalk.
Okay, so it can be, so it's not 10 feet then if you've got the 6 feet for these.
You have to have at least a 48-inch wide clear path down the sidewalk, and it cannot be interrupted. So if you have to go 10 feet from the curb to get around a tree or something else, that's how it works. We have been in negotiations for more than 2 years with FDOT to try to find some kind of happy medium on the lease, because FDOT, which is the Florida Department of Transportation, owns Lake and Lucerne and much of the sidewalk in front of most businesses. The property line is not straight down the street. It jags. Some people have 5 feet, some people have 10 feet, some people have no feet of actually private property, which they can use for a sidewalk cafe. So the state has been on us. They've threatened a lawsuit. We've had a constituent group representing people with disabilities threatening a lawsuit in the city about not being able to get down the sidewalk. They complained to FDOT, and it got the ball rolling really, really fast. The FDOT basically said, if you don't do something about it, we will come down there and we'll pick up everybody's tables and chairs, including your trash cans and benches, and haul them away. We've delayed as much as we can. Our final notice and the ordinance change to facilitate the sidewalk cafe permit process per what the state wanted was done in September. At this point, we only have 2 or 3 businesses that haven't quite got all their stuff together in regards to sidewalk cafe permit. And there are other businesses that have refused to actually apply for one. I don't want to use anyone by name, but there are several businesses that used to have sidewalk cafe areas. They could have, and they would just go through the process and make the application, and they have not. And I can't coerce or force them to do that, to bring tables back. FDOT also wants to charge, and this is the most controversial piece, is they would like an appraisal done of the street value of the square feet of each sidewalk cafe area that's used. And they want to charge every business a lease rate. We are vehemently against that. The FDOT, because of, and I understand where they're coming from in a way, is that most of the revenue comes from gas tax. And as people get more efficient and we have more electric cars, their revenues have dropped dramatically over the past 10, 15 years. They're looking at other revenue sources. So they basically are of the position that if anyone is using their right-of-way, they should pay for it. It's not a very customer service friendly atmosphere, and the city has been trying to negotiate with them a transfer of Lake and Lucerne back to city ownership, but we don't want to take it unless the city, unless those streets are actually up to code, which surprisingly enough they're not. There are ADA compliance problems, there are condition problems, curb problems, a number of things. I believe at last count there was about $3.7 million worth of work needed to be done to the roads from Gulfview to A on both Lake and Lucerne, and we wanted all that done before it was transferred over. We're still in negotiations. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. Fortunately, most businesses comply with the sidewalk cafe ordinance that we have, and what will happen with what FDOT wants to charge people as a lease rate, I don't know. I've not heard much about it lately. I kind of pulled out of it because it was really between attorneys how it's going to work. And so Christy Goday, who's with the city attorney's office, Glenn Troy City is our outside counsel, is working with them to figure out how that's going to be implemented, if it will be. And the sidewalk cafe permit process that comes to my office is actually we administer on behalf of public services. Public services is actually responsible for all the rights of way in the city.
Can our former mayor and now state senator Jeff Clements have any influence in this at all?
He probably could.
Have you worked with him at all?
We have worked with him. We haven't been overly successful with a number of things in regards to Lake Worth. We tried to get a program established. There's a program in the state called for disadvantaged counties, and it's for counties that don't really have the means to maintain themselves at the highest standard, and they can get state money for infrastructure improvements. There's no complementary program for cities, so we pushed very hard to have one created. Well, the state legislators chose to put a cap on the population of disadvantaged cities. I think at 30,000 people, and we're at 34. And the next
How
jump,
do we bump on 4,000?
we actually have significantly more than 34, but they're not all correctly reported. And the next bump is 50,000 as a metropolitan, a standard metropolitan area. So we are in that 20,000 gap where we get nothing. The mayor has gone to Washington, D.C. and spoken to the Department of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development, other ones, and say, you know, we are in sort of a catch-22. We're too big to be little, and we're too small to be big, and we're the second poorest municipality in the entire county. And everyone thinks of Palm Beach County being very, very wealthy, as you can tell by the average